going to call the meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust for August 12th, 2021 to order. We are hybrid, so I am going to take a roll call for attendance. We'll go with remote first. Ed Prisby.
Prisby here.
Dan Kusher.
Kusher here.
Matt Often.
Often here.
And Bruce Spinney, I'm also here. Okay, so I am not sure where our other members are, which makes some of the stuff that we're going to discuss tonight a little bit difficult. But we'll get through as much as we can, and then we'll have people watch the tape. So the first item I have tonight is a reorganization of officers. Now this is also dovetailed into a discussion. So I have the treasurer and the clerk's position, which historically in the past has just been to update us on meeting minutes. So in the future, while we wait to get our administrative assistant, and when we get to the point, which could be soon, that we're going to need to actually spend money, I would like a representative on the trust to be able to handle that responsibility. So when we move into consultants or dealing with external payments to vendors, which is going to come up as we move forward, the treasurer is going to be responsible for actually managing that piece of it. And what I thought to share responsibility amongst the members of the trust is we could assign that position once a quarter. So every 4 months it changes over. So we all get accustomed to what we're doing and what we have to get accomplished as far as administrative work for the board. Now we are going to have an administrative assistant come in probably over the next 2 or 3 months, but there is an interim period there, and I would still feel more comfortable having trust members to manage those particular things. Now writing a check, mailing a check, and stuff like that is something that we're probably going to have staff do. But to familiarize all the members of the trust with all the interactivity that goes on, the faces, the names, all the people that you're going to network with in the municipal center, I think it's important for our functionality as a independent kind of municipality that we're handling ourselves, and then everybody knows. And then when we transition into a year like this year where we had 5 members get turned over in one particular year, there'll be some bridge of knowledge between the generations, so to speak. And the reason why I think that's important for us is, a lot of these big projects, they take 2 or 3 years to develop, to build, to get completed, to get funded. It goes past some of the lifetimes of the 2-year positions that we have. So in order to make sure we maintain good relationships with our vendors, we have to have some continuity. And that continuity is not so much the personnel, but the policies we have in place. It lends a little bit to the stability of it, and I think it would be helpful for us to be able to present that stability as we negotiate for deals, which could be for considerable amounts of money with partners like GSX or people that are bidding on a particular project we're going out for. Also, our reliance on staff for a lot of these things, as Dan and I kind of ran into this week, there's a lot of overlap for access to the website, for posting meeting minutes. So as we kind of get through those kinks, the clerk's responsibility will be making sure that we do post, we get everything set up, we file accordingly with the clerk's office, our meeting minutes in a prompt manner. I believe tonight we'll have the remainder of the outstanding minutes. So Dan has actually done a terrific job of getting us caught up over, maybe 10 years worth of minutes?
Oh, no, it was like 2.
Whatever. So 2 years is still a long
Maybe
time.
Maybe 2.5.
It's going to be very important for us to maintain an order to this. So the clerk will also be responsible for managing that aspect of it. And I think it's something that we can share, again, over like 4 months until we all get accustomed to it. I don't believe there's an actual need for a vice chair on this board. I'll leave it up to members to tell me that's okay. But the clerk or the treasurer, as we swap through positions, should be sufficient to run an actual meeting for a particular night. In the rare, occurrence where we don't have a quorum, or if we don't have a chairman there or something like that, we probably will not be having a meeting anyways. So we're not all here. Dan, I put this on there, but if everybody's okay with, kind of how we're going to set this up, I'd like Dan to remain as clerk because we're just starting to kind of build the how this works. He's clerk currently, so we don't actually have to have a motion. He can just remain as such. But the treasurer's position is going to be a learning experience. So they're going to have to spend some time in the municipal center with the accountant's office, making sure we know which account goes to which, how they want their invoices submitted, and things of that nature. Elizabeth Haynes is currently our treasurer. She's not here tonight, which is another thing that we're going to need to make sure we talk about. Attendance is going to be mandatory for these particular meetings. If we can't make it, you can't make it on a regular basis. You need to reach out and let me know. More, just as much a matter of courtesy as a matter of, hey, if we're deliberating, we're bringing people in, like for example, GSX to talk about something. They're down in Florida, and they have their own schedules and their own programs, and that's just one particular outfit that we could be working with. But it's tough to have a group that's going to come in and meet with us, and we only have minimal membership here because these things require votes, majority votes typically for everything that we're going to do. And again, maintaining that stability, maintaining that that level of professionalism amongst the trust, I think is going to be important moving forward. Does anybody have any comments on what I just have outlaid? Just Ed, I can't actually see you, so I don't know if you're going to raise your hand, and I'm not really following the hybrid. So if you have anything for me, just start with you. If you don't, just remain silent, and we'll move to the other board members.
Okay.
Is that
I'm all
okay?
set.
Perfect. Dan, do you have any input?
That all sounds good to me. I guess the only thing I'm not totally clear on at this point is whether we want to move forward tonight with treasurer or if we want to give Elizabeth a chance to.
We're going to have to wait. I'm going to have to reach out to her again.
That's what I was going to suggest.
So I will continue to make the inroads with how it's set up, and then I will kind of bring the next treasurer, or if it remains her, on board with the people to meet and the bills that need to be paid and things of that nature.
So she's the current treasurer, but she has not been fulfilling that role in the way that you're envisioning it going forward.
No, and typically the treasurer has only just gotten a report for the balance that was in our accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Typically we relied on staff to handle most of our billing and invoice work. Moving forward, we need to kind of make sure that we're on top of that, and at least we know where everything's going. So no, she doesn't really have a role as treasurer. There's nothing really to do.
Got it.
This will be kind of brand new. It was just kind of like a position that we did.
Yeah, I think part of Bruce's point is that the treasurer's responsibilities are going to be growing.
Right.
So that's
As we move into more of a development phase, and got it.
Like it would have been, while we were going through the rental assistance program and stuff like that, it was very difficult to kind of navigate everything. And the trust really didn't know, staff was able to kind of handle everything, so, which is fine. But, if we have an extended program, that's going to go for a couple years, we want to make sure that we know exactly what that program is. And staff changes as well, so, it happens. All right, so we'll move over for that. Everybody has an idea of what I was kind of getting at. If you're watching this recording later on and you're not in attendance and you're a trust member, reach out to me by email directly, not to the entire trust, and let me know if you have any input on it. And I will put it on our next meeting for movement.
Sounds good.
All right, so then we have people here for 25 Worcester Street. It's the next one on. I mean, we're going to be kind of going back into this because some of these things kind of overlap. So bear with it while we go through, but we might be talking about this particular project in another action item that we have on here this evening. So when we're done with technically our discussion on 25 Worcester Street, we may have more to say under another item. So I assume you're here for 25 Worcester Street. So just, don't get up and leave just because we move on to topic C, because we might be backtracking a little bit. I put these under actionable items. They'll be on there as actionable items for the foreseeable future in case we do need to take some action on them and this goes past the discussion. And it may be something simple that we need to further engineering or something like that. So I don't want to hamstring us. So that's why they're going to be there under the action items so we can actually do something. Everything, of course, will be submitted 48 hours in advance, according to open meeting law to make sure that everybody's prepared properly if we need to vote on something. And members and people in the audience, this is our first meeting where we're kind of getting back really into the swing of things. A lot of our membership has remained the same. 2 months going into this, we could have had a lot of turnover. So we haven't been able to kind of pull an organized meeting together because we had to find a time that was good for everybody, that people could come and spend a couple hours. That's why it's an odd time at 7:45 on a Thursday night, because we needed a room where we could be recorded. So it fell into that time slot, and then we had to kind of wait for all the members to get on to figure out what time was convenient for everybody. We settled on 7:45, and apparently everybody was okay with that, but not quite okay. So there might be some stuff to iron out. So 25 Worcester Street. So the only real update I have for the actual parcel is in conference with council going through how the deed is restricted. Recorded is the actual warrant article, which is sufficient to restrict it to the language that's in the warrant. The reason this is of particular interest is the town, as it stands, in order for these units to count against SHI, we need to have discernible evidence that one particular group, a demographic 55 plus, is in more need of affordable housing in town than any other particular demographic. Or you can't kind of dictate that it's 55 plus and say it's affordable. Now it will be affordable and you can run that program, but it will not count against your SHI, or may not count. So that we kind of verified, which, as far as what we want to accomplish there on 25 Worcester Street, it does have an impact on, what we want to do there. So we have some of the concepts that we worked on. We can pull those out of kind of mothballs and kind of go back through them. But as homework between this meeting and the next meeting, which will of course be next month, I want everybody to pick up the concept plans and kind of go through them and refamiliarize themselves with them. But that's the big update for 25 Worcester Street as we talk about what we want to do with it. So it may lend itself to a smaller project. It may lend itself to just sitting on it for the time being and waiting as we approach other projects in town. It may be something that we would want to talk about going back and saying, well, okay, Worcester Street may not work for us the way it's set up. Go back to town meeting and adjust the article to unrestrict the deed. Or, and as soon as I'm finished talking, I'll lend the time to everybody else to kind of mention an idea. But those are the things that we can do. But they require, outside influences, which could be difficult. But the property is portfolioed under our control. There's no time restriction. There's no sunset on it. It doesn't flip back to the town unless the trust decides by vote to actually sell it back or gift it back to the town. So it's fairly wide open to what we can do with it as far as development is concerned, as long as it meets the deed restriction. It just is not going to be impactful on SHI. And if that's a chief concern, so there's some other projects that we could leverage this particular property against and do something a little bit more productive and in a better area. So just, Ed, I don't see, of course, so I'm going to give you this opportunity to chime in real quick, and then I'm going to open up to the board up in the room.
Yeah, thanks. So, I saw a memo from DHCD that also discussed 55 and older communities, and you're right. What they want to be able to see is some evidence that the community that you're seeking to serve is in fact disadvantaged, because they don't want to promote discrimination against younger families and people with children, which is a perfectly valid point. There simply isn't enough housing in Massachusetts. In particular, it's difficult for people with families. Which isn't to say that that we couldn't do this. I mean, I think it would probably behoove us at some point to just workshop this one particular issue, have a conversation with council about what our options are, and then decide on a direction to go in. Given the advent of Upton Street that we're going to talk about, and given the advent of Pine Street, maybe SHI isn't quite as important as it was just a year ago. That could very well be true. Certainly, the ground around us is always shifting. So, with that in mind, you could do something smaller. You could say, oh well, you do 8 units there, and we could, spend not a lot of money doing that, and then go and concentrate on another locus. Or you could say, well, maybe we're not as worried about SHI anyway, and let's just, do the project that, we want to envision there, whatever that is. The other thing that we're going to have to eventually have a conversation about, and I know this is probably of chief concern to the people in the room, once you decide a direction to go in, then you want to decide on the concept and, look a little bit further down the road. If you are doing something that's over 10 or 12 units, and this does have to go before the ZBA, then it ends up being a lit project. Then there are design considerations and elements of architecture and fitting into the neighborhood that you do want to address. So that's the point that we're going to address that stuff. But we're not there. We're not at that point yet where we've got a bunch of information to give people about what this is ultimately going to look like and what the population is that we're going to serve, because there's just a bunch of questions that we have to get through. So at some point we should probably have council in, and we should probably workshop it.
Yeah, so that's when we, in a discussion item a little bit further down, we're gonna, brainstorm some ideas to create some efficiency on how we can, offset some of the workload and divvy up responsibilities, things of that nature. Dan, do you have anything for us?
Uh,
Are you typing the minutes?
yeah, figured.
You can do that later. Just watch the tape if you want.
Oh, that's good.
right.
So, yeah, I was also thinking, like, with 8 Pine Street and Upton Street, it does seem like we have these. I mean, 8 Pine Street was in the pipeline, but Upton Street is, much more recent update. And if we can get that up to 25% affordable, that plus 8 Pine Street would put us above the 10%. Like that, we would be done with SHI. I mean, at least until we get the 2020 census numbers, and then hopefully we'll still be above it. But yeah, I think then we can, we're kind of freed up a little bit, and we can, think a little more creatively. Like really early on, you were saying, Bruce, I think you said something about like cottage style homes there or something. Like we can do something that's not, extremely dense. We can do something that's different. So I think putting this sort of on the back burner while we work out with GSX what we're gonna, if we can get that 25%, I think that's a better focus for us right now.
Okay. So that's going to blend down into another topic that we have a little bit further down to, but just bear with us if you're watching this or if you're in the audience as we kind of skip around, because they do have a lot to do with one another. But when I set up an agenda, I want to make sure that that items on there are clear and distinct. But it's within our purview to kind of go back and forth. I just don't want anybody to be confused as we're skipping over things. So there's very few ways that we can set this up in a manner in which we can talk freely about it and actually have actionable items to work with, and then keep the public informed about actually what we're talking about. Matt.
So just a couple questions, and I'm the newest member, so forgive me while I catch up a little bit. So what I'm hearing is we can develop affordable units at that property, but they will not count against SHI unless we have evidence that will demonstrate that there's a need for that population.
That's correct.
Because of the deed. So we can still develop affordable housing there, it just won't go against the SHI.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And there's definitely still value in doing that.
Sure,
too, so.
sure. No, but obviously we need to prioritize the work that we're doing though.
Right.
The other question that I had is just around, do we have any sense of what kind of evidence that would look like?
So our housing production plan, I thought would be the place to start. I was told that's not sufficient. I'm not actually sure what makes it sufficient. I know, Chris, in your travels through affordability, in Shrewsbury, I assume Shrewsbury doesn't have a demographic that's in any more need than another.
No, that's the first that I've heard of taking that route. I'd be happy to reach out to contacts at DHCD to see what kind of threshold that is. I don't know if I haven't seen the memo from DHCD, but I'd be happy to kind of see if there is some context. I mean, I think there's arguments to be made. You know, over 55 has typically fixed incomes. You have, you know, the growing regional population of over 55. So there may be some arguments to be made there. I don't know what level of evidence we need to get to, though.
Like a lot of things in this particular area of mass general law, there's no clear distinction. So probably problem is I don't want us to get us too far down the line and then figure out that, oh, this does not count against SHI. We just spun our wheels for 6 months.
Of course.
And our goal was to hit SHI, which I assume it is, and we never really decided if that's our main goal. But now that we have some stuff actually in front of us and we can actually get to that goal, you know, that's good segue into some of the other topics we're going to talk about. Did you have anything more, or?
I would just say, it makes sense to me at least to kind of put a pin in the development of this property until we clarify what it is that we would need in terms of evidence. Is it a study? Is there any precedent for other towns that have gone this route and what they needed to demonstrate? Because otherwise I don't think it makes sense, strategically to really be thinking about this at this point, given everything else that's going on.
Yep.
So that's all I had.
Outside of the fact that it is something that we can leverage against. So it is something that it's, like I mentioned, kind of in our portfolio. So when we communicate and we talk, and if we were to set up a development there, even if it was a small cottage based or just something that would have to go through a normal permit process, that's tradable.
Sure.
So I have next on here, and I probably should have put GSX in C and then scooted it around. But 53 Millbury Street, give me 1 second, Ron, is actually Hudson Ave. So just, Matt, you're new to the board, and I don't believe you were actually on the select board during this process.
I watched that meeting though.
Okay, so then you're familiar with we were kind of waylaid. We broached the idea, we kind of went through it, and then we took steps for survey work and things of that nature. And then we kind of went before the select board at the time, of which I was a member of, and we were kind of stopped by a 1960 article. So that article basically divvied up the property. Across the street in Hudson, which is actually part of the parcel, is Article 97. That's not going to come out without an action of the state. That's gone. It's a lot of ledge in there anyways. It's not really usable. On the other side of the street, there is a considerable amount of uplands. And Millbury Street has a lot of the infrastructure required for us to put much better density or to kind of open up the pan of ideas of what we can accomplish there. It's an under-trafficked road. It has an intersection there that is a good intersection, as opposed to a lot in town that's fail. The grades are great coming in and out. You have secondary egresses going through neighborhoods. It's a walkable area. There's a lot of things on that property that we tried to illustrate at the time. Unfortunately, there's just no momentum to move it past deciding where to put a cemetery 30 years from now. So to revisit this now that we're talking about all these other broader prospects, perhaps it's time to go back and say, okay, well, this is a much more benign site to do work on, and perhaps we need to, talk to the select board, talk to the community, especially the community around 25 Worcester Street, which 60 units would have a much greater impact on than the residents in that area. So there's a considerable amount more buffering, screening there. It is a much more desirable property. What it will take to actually get it there is a retraction of the article from 1960. And then an additional article which would have then convey the property similar to how we convey 25 Worcester Street to the trust. And probably another article to have the cemetery commission a study for where they would want to put additional burying capacity. I'm not sure what you want to talk about or call that. I think probably now is the time that we don't have any particular project that is far down the line. We have an interested body in making some of these things happen. It's probably time to have those discussions. But I can't act alone. I want to make sure that the trust isn't telling me kind of, who I should be talking to and what I should be putting together. Especially talking with council, and Kathleen will be taking care of the lion's share of this and making sure we have everything. Now, the trust can put forward articles on its own behalf on the warrant, but it would be much better if we went to the select board and went through that process. If we were going to do that, we got to do it relatively quick because you're going to close the warrants, the second week of September?
September 17th or 20th, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we would need actionable item on our September meeting, and we would need to probably before that go to the select board and talk with them and see if this is something that we could wrap our heads around.
Yep.
And then we would want some type of informational session in between before we got to the actual town meeting itself. Now, I think that's doable. I think we can manage that. We might have to divvy it up. I have a lot on my plate with all the other stuff here, so I will need some help getting that done. But you're new, so you get fresh legs. You're on the select board.
I'm happy to help. Whatever you
Alright.
need, Bruce. I'm in support of bringing this before the select board. I think you've got a board that cares about affordable housing and understands the crisis that we're in right now in Massachusetts. So yeah, I
So-
look forward to exploring that. I guess I just wonder, what do you think we need to prepare for that conversation? And because it is coming up quick.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'm just going to solicit for some other comments so
Sure.
I can organize my thoughts for everybody. Dan?
Sounds good to me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Ed, how about you?
Yeah, no, we've been talking about Hudson Street for a long time. So, I think you're going to run into ultimately the same stumbling blocks that we ran into last time with, concerns about capacity at the cemeteries. And we're going to need to have, I suppose, a way to address that. But yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. So, with response to the cemetery, when it was kind of told to us, the commission's probably going to have to go before the board as well. The board's probably going to have to ask for that. But from our perspective, and you watched the meeting, and most of the people here have watched the meeting. I'm not sure, Chris, if you have or not, but that was the chief concern, was that property was, it wasn't deeded over. It was just assigned by town meeting to eventually have a cemetery. And how it was portrayed to us is that sometime in the next 30 years or so, there will be additional capacity that is needed. But no official study has ever been done. No look at other town property has been done to see where it's well suited to be. Has it really been done? Now, that being said, do they got a couple decades they can do that in? If they can't find something and something has to be purchased, it can tend to be expensive, like it was in Westboro. But there is sufficient town property on the books that I believe could work. So we would need to draft the articles, get the language before the select board just so they see what it's like and the legality of it. That should probably be on our ends. We would need a couple outreach meetings to talk about it, we would probably want to reach out to the cemetery commission and meet with them directly, perhaps with just the trust, or just with the select board, or perhaps all of us in the same room at one time.
Yep.
And see if we can hash out anything. From my perspective, there's ample time to do this. And the arguments that were made and constructed at the time were 3 years ago now? And I have yet to see any forward progress on a plan, on any type of activity whatsoever. So from my perspective, it's not a serious concern that remains cemetery. And if we want to go to town meeting and express our concerns to the town, we should just do it. But that's me. So that's a little bit more aggressive than some people like to be, but that's where my head's at around this. So I think there would be momentum there. I think there would be interest in there in a much more accessible project there than
Sure.
what we have currently going at 25 Worcester Street.
Okay.
Let me talk about GSX real quick. I know you're here, and I'm glad people actually, made the effort to come out. So I'm going to give a little time after we get to the end of the actionable items, and we'll take some feedback from the audience. If that sounds all right, give me another 15 minutes to go through the rest of this. Meeting minutes, we have 3. I'll accept the motion to accept them, just so I can get them off the docket here.
What are
I think there's 4.
the, what are the dates?
Yeah, sorry, let me pull that up.
And just word it into a motion for me, Dan. We'll get it moving.
Let's see, the
I put meeting minutes in D. I'm a little bit OCD, so I keep going to it, so I gotta get it off because I keep thinking that I'm gonna forget it, and so we're just gonna move it off. And next time I will put it on the back end of everything. But bear with my picadillos.
All right, it is. So I move that we accept the minutes for for the meetings on June 3rd, 2020, May 20th, 2021, July 22nd, 2020, and July 15th, 2020, as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor by roll call, we'll start with Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Dan Kusher,
Kusher, aye.
Matt Often,
Often I.
and Bruce Spinney, aye. It's been accepted. Whew, glad that's done. Okay, so a couple months ago, I asked for permission to start entertaining a conversation with GSX. It's taking a long time because there was an RFP process. It had to go back to town meeting in the interim. And then the bid actually had to be awarded before they were really, concerned with actually moving forward with the project. I'm talking mostly about 17 Upton, 8 Pine Street. I think Chris can give us an update real quick after this, but they're kind of like separate projects. That one's already fully affordable. It's a phased program. It's a lot of units, and it's going to make a significant impact on our SHI. They also have a project on 17 Upton Street, which is the old DPW building, including the shed. So there's actually 2 addresses there, but just to give a perspective of it, right across the street from the fire station, if you're looking out, there is a white barn, and then there's the old highway barn. And it's kind of a weird, key type of parcel, but that's what we're talking about. So that particular site is a very large complex that they want to put in multiple stories. I think probably 4 stories high. Parking that's also stacked, and a retail base on the bottom. And then some other things. If you've been following along, everybody can kind of have access to the RFP. And that's kind of right across the street from the new library, the fire station. The DPW building is, of course, not being used anymore, and the town wanted to sell it. So it's been sold, or it's in that agreement phase. So when I approached them, what I asked them was, okay, so they're at 10% affordable for the units, which is kind of matches what we want it to be as far as a bylaw is concerned. So I asked them, if they could provide me with some of their financials, and they did provide me with a pro forma a day ago. It did not make it into the packet. It will make it into the packet next, but we're going to have to review that.
Yep.
And they did give us some things they do have in the packet, which said, 10%, 20%, 25. The key number for us is the 25. So if we get it there and they design it and have a floor plan that meets and accommodates 40B on a local level, all of the units in that particular facility will count versus SHI. It also gives us the ability to put money into a particular project and partner with a developer who has significant skin in the game, and who will basically do nearly everything. So they're already moving forward with it. We're just basically saying, well, we can help you with the process. We can help you with, say, some of the soft costs. And when I say soft costs, what I mean is your survey work, your engineering, your permitting, things of that nature. Typically, your soft costs are the most expensive money to acquire when you're in the development world. So when you actually have a permit in place and you actually can put a shovel in the ground, typically your money that you're going to find to invest in that capital is a little bit easier to come by. Whether it's through banks, whether it's through private, GI, LI money, whatever. There's a whole bunch of terms there, but that's the basic gist of it. So if we were to put in dollars into a particular project, we could actually see and weigh the amount of affordability units we'll get out of those dollars we spend in the particular project. And this one, it would be about 39 units. When we would directly subsidize the better part of half of those, which is a considerable amount of units for the amount of money that we have to put in. But then also the argument is that we want to get to SHI. Those two particular projects, if they were to go to completion, would be enough units to put us over that 10% threshold, which gives the town a lot of, maneuverability, so to speak, and ability to dictate terms when somebody comes in and wants to do a 40B. Because they can't go right from there to the state and have the state kind of override our local zoning and things of that nature. So if we were to tell somebody who came in after, or even if we were in safe harbor, and say, well, we want half of your units to be affordable, and we want to make sure we have a say in what they look like and things of that nature, you can, within reason, of course. But it lets you actually accomplish more as far as the fate of the community and how it gets developed in the years forward. This is a concern for us because if anybody's looked at the master plan, which I think 6 of us have actually read, build out for the town is actually closer to 30,000 than it is to 20 where we're at now. So if you're in the community and you invested in the community and you want to spend the next 30 years here, the build out for the community is significantly higher than what we currently have for a population. So if you're concerned with those type of things, being able to have some marginal control from a town perspective, that's why it can be important to be at that threshold of 10% and be able to dictate some of those terms. The flip side of that, of course, is we're going to get 39 actual affordable apartments in town, which is an incredible accomplishment for a trust that really hasn't produced anything. There is a lot of stuff we're going to have to negotiate. This is going to be a fairly significant amount of money that will probably be requested. I know they met with the town to talk about a TIF for some of the operational sides. We cannot help. We do not have any real income as far as revenue is concerned outside of CPA reserve, which is statutorily required to come to us. But it's a fairly insignificant amount of money. What we would be able to do is kind of work with the town and then work with the contractor to make it appetizing for them to actually go to 39 units and that 25% threshold. So we would probably support them with some soft costs, permitting, things like that, and we can probably make sure that we have our position collateralized and we can secure it as best we can. But it's still a project. And it's still going to take 3 to 5 years to get through the system. So, it's a long, not drawn out, but it's a long process. But in order to like move what I'm talking with them about now to the next piece, I'm open to ideas on, how we should approach this, the negotiation, maybe subcommittee, which of course we have to post our meetings and record, and we'll do all that as well. But we can kind of, that subcommittee can look and kind of go through the diligence and then report back to the trust as a greater body and go through it, just so we parse out the work. I'm going to keep hitting on this, but I do somewhere between 6 and 10 hours a week on this. And it's there's going to be more work later on as we actually get into more stuff, and it's more responsibility than I want to take on as just a member of the trust. I don't mind doing it because I understand it and I've been around for a long time, so I know who to talk to, and it's easier. But I mean the rest of the trust to kind of take up pieces of this, because it's going to get to be an insurmountable amount of work, and I'm not going to do it full time. And Chris has a job, and we still don't have an assistant town planner, and we still don't have our administrative assistant, stuff like that. So,
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry I kind of rambled on, but hopefully I got most of my message there, and it's digestible for everybody for what we kind of want to do. Now I'm just going to open it up first, Ed, just as some ideas, and we don't have to go through all of this tonight. We have some members who, of course, aren't here who can just watch the tape. But over the next couple weeks, submit some ideas to me. If you get home and you think about it, send it to the trust so we can kind of go through it.
Yep.
And then I can make sure at the next we have a more organized approach to this so we can actually make some decisions on how we're going to move forward. So Ed, do you have anything for us?
No, I mean, I just want to point out that this is the sort of project we've been waiting 15 years for. We had basically two options: wait for something like this and, the perfect storm to come along where you could invest and subsidize some units, or, try and go out and reinvent the wheel. And we've done a little bit of both. We're looking for Millbury Street, and we're looking for, we have 25 Worcester. But this is certainly, subsidizing this is certainly an easier way to go. I think the only question is, how much of our resources do we want to invest to subsidize GSX? I do wonder, if we have these discussions, whether or not they actually will be taped in OML. I mean, I understand that the purpose of being transparent, but at the same time, I don't want GSX watching our meeting on how to negotiate with them. But, I guess we could talk about that offline, and do a little research on whether or not that needs to happen. But yeah, I'm all for it. This sounds fantastic.
Yeah, so that I did note that negotiating the terms of our agreement, if we could do that in executive session, because it is something that we're dealing with a contract
Right.
base that,
Right.
if we did it in the public, it would give away some of our hand. I think it's a little bit of a gray area, but I've been looking into that, so I'll make sure I follow up on that. So,
Sounds good.
I thought that's one of the reasons for contract negotiation stuff, but I mean, I don't know. Definitely should get it, clear.
I would think that we can too, but I'm just going to make sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind deliberating in open session about these type of things, and it's not like it's a bid process where it's a couple different, but it would be easier for us to say, we could execute agreements in open session, but talk about the framework of them and submit them back and forth and get an understanding, and then kind of have that pseudo closing where we actually vote. Matt?
Right.
I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, I don't think we can either.
If it's a contract negotiation with non-union personnel,
Mm.
you can do that. If there's a potential for pending litigation, that's a substantial chance of it. You can, but not just for any contract or negotiation process, unfortunately.
That's what I'm guessing as well, but
It is, yeah.
I'll get some verification so we know for sure, but kind of assume that we're going to end up doing this in open session.
Yep.
Dan, you have anything more?
No.
Okay.
So,
So-
Bruce, just one last comment. I guess for me, understanding, I think you talked about, how much of the trust's funds do we want to think about using for subsidizing and whatnot. To me, there's a sort of broader question of what's the vision of the trust, and that will help inform that decision. As a new member, if you have any suggestions in terms of meetings I should watch, where you guys defined what your vision is and balancing building new, subsidizing, trying to develop opportunities and acquire land and whatnot, I would definitely welcome that. If not, I'd like a conversation in an upcoming meeting in terms of what, what's our vision over the next 5 years.
Yep.
It would help make that decision for me.
Yeah, it makes sense, and of course we need a full complement for that.
Yep.
But is SHI our goal? If SHI is our goal, then our priority should be things like this. If balancing out and doing our own thing, and the type of affordable units that we want to create, that could be another thing too.
Yep.
So we do definitely need to make that decision. But in the past, we've never had a project like this, which is kind of in front of us that we could actually work with. So it's a relatively unique situation, and in the time that I've spent on the trust, of course we talk about these type of things, like the Jean Burnett property down in South Grafton. If somebody came in, but that was always kind of a, hey, give us some money so we can subsidize this type of thing. It was never a working relationship, which is why it was always off-putting to me. This particular one is a much more fluid conversation. The contractors are much more willing to work with us because they have a large parcel which they're putting tens of millions of dollars in town already. So they have a working relationship here that I think is relatively unique.
Yeah.
So the pro forma's there, so everybody can get the opportunity to kind of get familiar with the numbers, construction costs. You do have some elevations and stuff like that, which everybody should be able to access to. It gives you a general understanding of concept floor plans and things of that nature, what they're trying to accomplish there. They're by no means the finished product, but they will get you in the right mindset for what it's actually going to look like and what they're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
I can't tell you that, lumber costs and things of that nature, supply chain issues and stuff like that are probably stuff that, you can consider now, but most of this work is going to occur, probably not next year,
Right.
probably the year following. So it's, maybe 18 months, but that's the timeline that we're working with. Just the permitting and getting through the closing and all that stuff is probably a year. And then you're not going to do anything till afterwards. So, pro forma is going to be built around what their general estimates are going to be. We can have a conversation on whether we think those are accurate, but that's all part of it, and everybody's just going to have to get, kind of work through them. And then if you have any questions and you're not familiar with the stuff that's in there, Chris is here. He's got an elaborate experience in development. I do as well. And then, if there are questions about how this is structured, just in the back of your mind, a lot of communities will just do a grant program. So they'll handle it like a construction loan. So as soon as you hit certain benchmarks and there's a requirement to make payments to vendors like engineers, survey work, etc., paying for a permit fee and stuff like that, then they draw off it. And then at the end, it closes out and it comes back to us for anything that's remainder. Or if it gets completely tapped, it's gone. There is no real way by which the trust can enter into a business relationship and expect to see a return on that particular investment. So there's going to be a grant program. So I know Elizabeth brought this up in one of our past meetings where, can we recoup our funds? If we give them $1 million and then they make a ton of money off this project, can we get the $1 million back with some on the top? You really can't. There's no real framework for us to do that. Now we got the Pulte money because it was a settlement. So, in true fairness, they're only allowed to make a certain amount of money on these particular developments, and anything in excess of that, it would typically come back to the town.
Bruce, is that specific to 40B comprehensive permits, and so 8 Pine Street is not that? Is that the difference?
No, I think 8 Pine Street is an actual affordable. It's going through a LIP, isn't it?
I'd have to look back at what the specific. I believe it was a lip, DHCD lip.
Okay, because I
Program,
thought
but I don't remember.
I'll get something more concrete so you can know. But in the past, that's how developments have worked, and that's part of like that how, it kind of gets set up so they they move profit around and things of that nature. It's part of the game, I suppose. But anyway, so I will put a little bit more detail. If you have any thoughts when we leave this, and people watching this, who are supposed to be in attendance tonight, again, just send an email directly to me. I will put the things together and then I'll get them on the next meeting. I thought it was important for us to actually get started and get a routine meeting down, so people have some reasonable expectation of an outcome from us. We will have to probably have sub meetings. There might be something that comes up that doesn't work with the time frame that we have. It won't wait a month and things like that. So we'll have to accommodate for that. So with that being said, I know we've talked a lot and I threw a lot of information out there to digest. We're at the end of our action items. We don't actually have any action to take on these items except for the meeting minutes, which thankfully I got out of the way. Seeing that you were all polite enough to actually meet us in person, I wanted to start the process of actually soliciting inputs, just so the trust gets a flavor of, the neighborhood and what's out there. I don't want this to be a gripe session. I want this to be a constructive session. So the caveat to having public participation is I want it to be constructive. So let's not argue with each other. Let's not open it up to be unfriendly. Let's just put some stuff. You have some concerns. We'll make sure we start to address them. Things and ideas that you have, we can start making sure we catalog those things. Other stuff that we talked about through A through E that you want to comment on or you have an idea for, things like that. And if you're shy of a microphone or something like that, just digest the information, send us an email. I don't care if it's anonymous or not. When we're in public session, you're going to have to come up to the mic, speak into the mic so we can record it, and you're going to have to tell everybody who you are and where you live. So if you're not familiar with that aspect of kind of the public discourse, so to speak, that's what you do here. If you're not comfortable with that, just send me an email. Send it right to the trust or send it to Chris's staff and he'll get it over to me. If you don't want people to know, what your thoughts are. And I'm completely fine with that, and everybody up here should be completely fine with that as well.
Yep.
But when you're here, you got to talk into the mic. So I appreciate everybody wearing a mask. Ron, you had your hand up a little while ago. Why don't you kick us off? You can either have the podium or if you want to sit down. But introduce yourself. Tell us where you live.
Right. Ron Warwick, 32 Worcester Street. Now that you've gotten to this point, I now have 3 questions.
Sure.
First, can we assume now that Mr. Prisby is an appointed member of the trust?
Yes.
Okay. Second, I thought I heard a while ago that you said you might, relative to 25 Worcester Street, like to go back to town meeting for a vote to de-restrict the deed.
Yeah.
And I think you know that I had a warrant article at this town meeting, and I was told that it was unactionable because since the town did not own the property, they could not take any action relative to my motion. So I would have to believe that if the town doesn't own the property, they can't unrestrict it. It would sort of be like your previous owner of your home writing a deed that he submits to the registry in Worcester that changes your boundaries. I think once it's gone, it's gone. Just an observation.
What's the third question?
Oh, the third question, and I apologize for my confusion on 17 Upton Street, but I'm trying to understand, is it going to be a 40B comprehensive permit? Or do you know? I mean, I know it's not directly your responsibility, but
It is not proposed as a 40B.
it's not going to be.
No, it would go through local permitting. So it's only been, the RFP was issued and awarded. They still have to go through local permitting, which would, given their proposal, would be a site plan special permit through the planning board.
Right. So the 10, 20, 30% is simply a thing that they're offering the town. They're not required to do anything, are they?
10%.
10? They are 10? Okay. And lastly, I noticed you have questions for council. Is council going to be online or are these for future questions?
No. So until we get, is that the last of your questions?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll work backwards first. Council, I wanted to make sure that everybody here is aware that we have council now. Everybody that's on the trust now voted for it. I didn't know that membership was going to remain the same. So now that everybody's here, we kind of know. So this is basically there. So if somebody has one of these questions, like about how to acquire that deed or change the deed at town meeting, these are things that we can kind of put together, and then we can go to her and have her, look into it for us without having to actually spend a couple hours at a kind of logistics meeting like tonight is, which we're paying for her to be at. So that's why I have that spot as a discussion piece, just to kind of collect everything, as kind of like an internal policy of how we want to handle our consultants.
Well, that for me, that question was more personal, and that if she's not here and these are for future questions, then I think the majority of the people here would anticipate there aren't going to be any other discussion on 25 Worcester Street. We probably might all go home.
Well, fair enough.
So that was the only reason I asked that particular question.
So that was more for the it was more for us in how we handle like a grant program, how we approach Hudson. As we open up a particular project like 25 Worcester Street and we get a little bit more into the weeds, we will want her here with us. But if it's just an open dialogue with, some like we're doing tonight, just kind of getting ideas and trying to unpackage it and let everybody know, then I didn't feel it was she needed to make the trip.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so backwards into your other question regarding the town meeting. So it's my understanding, and of course this is something that we'll bring up with council as well, is that if you did decide to have a citizen's petition to remove that deed restriction, town meeting would have the authority to remove the article that's attached to the deed. So the deed is not actually recorded with the warrant article language there. If the warrant article language were to change and overturn the particular attachment, we would re-record the deed. So the owner of that particular, and we'll call it an easement just for a lack of a better term, is the town and the municipality. And the town can act as a town body. I'm not sure what qualifies, if it's a 9/10 vote, if it's a 2/3 vote, if it's a simple majority vote. But a town meeting action can take it off. So whoever told you that you couldn't do what you were doing for that particular petition you had was correct. It wasn't the town's land. You can't actually, you can't decide its fate without the trust's approval or the trust putting it forward. But you could certainly change an easement that the town owns on it, so to speak. I'm using easement as a very loose term.
It applies. It applies.
I should have put the question. Go ahead.
Would it be correct to kind of summarize that the property is not town meetings to take back, but the restriction is town meetings to alter
Sure.
or remove? Is that?
If you had an easement on your neighbor's property to have your septic service or sewer service something, and you found another way to, and you rebuilt your septic and no longer required it, you would have to be the person that would alter that easement. So in a similar fashion, I know it's a loose. I'm trying to just build an analogy so you can kind of get an understanding of what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I will find out for certain what that actually means before we actually move to another.
Well, we have plenty of time, I'm sure. But, so can I assume there will probably be no other discussion on 25 Worcester Street?
No.
I can't assume that, or I?
No, we won't have any more
okay.
actionable items.
Okay.
I just wanted us to get through our piece of it and then have people from, start to engage
Thank you.
on a very loose level. Come on up.
Hey guys, Justin Hollander for Hillside Avenue. So nice to be able to see everyone in person. Really pleased to hear earlier in the meeting the support for the possible 8 units on 25 Worcester Street. I think that's really the good direction to go in. We talked 5 months ago about that was an option that would be allowable under existing zoning. And I just want to reiterate that that's something that I personally am very supportive of on that property, affordable housing. That might not count towards SHI, but it's something that'll serve the community and be a good use. You guys would serve as a good steward for that property. And so one of the things that we did talk about, whether or not 5 or 4 months ago, was that Habitat for Humanity is interested in that site. And I was hoping that you said that you would invite them at some point,
Yep.
Mr. Spinney. So I was hoping that you could speak to your contacts with them and if they're going to be able to come to a future meeting.
Sure. Did you have any other questions?
No, that's it.
Okay, Chris.
So I actually have been in contact with Habitat for Humanity, the regional director. They expressed that their capacity for building new units is typically within 3 units a year. So this project may actually be a little bit larger of scale than what they're typically used to. I expressed that we're always happy to work with them if they took a portion of this project as we move forward, or but we have to be conscious of their capabilities moving forward as well.
So when we were discussing it back, and I apologize for as much as it's worth anyways, that this is a long process. But I just want to make sure everybody, I want to reiterate to everybody here that your patience is, something that we're going to have to ask for. These things take a long time. We had a lot of other things brewing. We have a lot of membership that's turned over. And from my, as a member of the community and the chairman of this particular trust, we have a lot of autonomy and a lot of authority, and a lot of funds. And to be good stewards of those funds that we have, which is for the betterment of the community, we don't go to town meeting to spend our money. So I need to make sure that when we make decisions like this, that we have a body that's stable. We make sure we know that the trustees know the responsibility that they're getting into, and we're not making decisions rashly. So, I was always going to honor the bringing in Habitat. I was always going to honor having more of a dialogue with the people that actually come to our meetings. It took a lot longer than I think a lot of people appreciated or wanted to wait in the audience, but it's a natural course of things. So I tried to make that as clear as I could. My conversations with Habitat were the same. Once you're going to get up into the 5, 6, 7, 8 units, it's beyond their capacity to do it. Now we could go to them and say, well, come in and make a pitch for it. Show us what it is, and perhaps we phase it over 2 or 3 years and see if they'll make a commitment to us. If that's the desire of the trust to move it forward in that direction, we're certainly going to put that concept in front of everybody here. So we're going to start to actually unpack all this over the next couple months. But with other big prospects on the table, I think it's more important for us to focus on some of the very real opportunity that's in front of us. And we'll continue to work on 25 Worcester Street to make it as palatable for everybody as we can.
Yeah, I appreciate the response. I spoke to both the executive director, Debbie, and Hank, who you've been in touch with, and they both said 8 units was fine, and maybe they were imagining over 2 years. I don't know, but I think it'd just be great for the community if you could invite them to a meeting, and then we could see on video or in person that conversation. Sure. Because long term, maybe it's not a priority for you right now, but before moving ahead with any project, it would be just great to have them as part of the conversation.
It would be a good exercise because there are other properties in town that
Right.
could be prospects. We did look at one a few years ago, which is the last interactions we had with Habitat. That particular one didn't work, just because of the economics of it. But there are other, places in town where we could, utilize them. So when the trust is here, it would behoove us to make sure, just as an exercise, that the trust is aware of the opportunities that are out there. So, yes,
Thank you.
we will invite them. And I'm sure they will send somebody just for an informational session too, even if it's not to discuss a bigger project. Who else out here wants the mic? Okay, well, good. Appreciate, we're gonna move into some of the,
Yeah, come on up.
oh, where were you? I'm sorry.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but I listened to the selectmen's meeting the other night, and I heard over and over that the people in the neighborhood are so interested in their own houses and what they paid for them that they would never even consider affordable housing of any kind. My husband and I are both social workers, and we've been working on affordable housing not only around here, but everywhere. For our clients, for the people we worked with. I worked with children and families. He worked with the elderly. We've been on this kick forever. All right? So to say that we don't want affordable housing is nonsense. We would love to see affordable housing. But we voted at that meeting for it to be elderly housing, and that's what we'd like to see. If you get it changed, then that's a whole different thing, I guess. But it was elderly when we were there. The other thing is, we want it to fit into the neighborhood and to fit into the center. That's all we've ever been about, as far as I'm concerned, and my husband is concerned. So I just want to share that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to some discussion pieces. You're welcome to stay. If everybody's going to be on their way out, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to clear out because it does, filter in a lot of noise. So I'll give a couple moments. No. Thank you. And we do appreciate seeing everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Might as well take the opportunity to thank Chris for coming to be in attendance with us tonight, and for Jack up there for filming this for us. Really appreciate it. Okay, next piece we have, I just kind of, it's a broad brush, but it's outreach programs and strategy moving forward. So we had a situation, I'm going to call it a situation lightly, where we had outside influences wanting to have meetings to kind of move this forward. I don't really want to talk too much about why or how it got there. I just want to make sure moving forward that we are approachable and that we have the mindset of outreach is something that we need to do, and we should be organized to do it. And if somebody out there has, an idea for us to carry on a message and stuff like that, it would behoove us to take into account. The one caveat to that is it should be on our own terms. It is our property to manage. It's what we were appointed to handle. So I think moving forward, now that we have like a dedicated night of the month, everybody's going to see that, yes, the trust meets on the second Thursday at 7:45. I can get you there and we can ask him to put something on it. We didn't have that before, and let's, figure that that's probably why some of these things happened the way they were. But I wanted it here just so we could clear the air on it, make sure moving forward we are in charge of our own destiny as far as the trust is concerned. Because these things do have value. Just what you saw there, I think people appreciated being heard to some degree or less. I want to make sure that the trust is making decisions on their own behalf and is not kind of manipulated by the audience, which can happen. It certainly happened to me. Typically, when people show up to these meetings, they typically are opposed to it. That's the general kind of way it is in public discourse. But we're here now. So we're going to start making these decisions. We're going to start to make sure that we're getting this information out there, and then we have an organized method to do it. We're not quite there yet, but we need to get there. So it kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the clerk and the treasurer, setting up a common way we do things so everybody knows what to do. And I was speaking with Matt briefly about this, and I believe I talked to Ed about it too, who have some experience on the select board in a much higher capacity than like what happens here on the trust. It's important for trust members, individual trust members, to have confidence in what we're doing. And I think to help grow that confidence is to have members that kind of know everything. Because if you watch the select board meeting a couple weeks ago, when we had 5 or 6 great candidates. I've never seen them in municipal government before, and it's fantastic that we have new fresh faces coming in because it's good perspective.
Absolutely.
It's great for the actual system itself. But when they come on the trust and they don't know anybody or anything, I want to make sure that they have a way to get, not indoctrinated is a bad word for it, but understand onboarding. Yeah, understand what this is, and kind of so it builds that and instills that confidence, and then their ability to get up and speak and to convey their own ideas is very, very important. Because what I've kind of found in my tenure doing these type of things is You know, when people come and they're in the audience, it's very difficult to speak on these things, and especially when you have to do it in person. Zoom makes it a little bit easier, email makes it a little bit easier, but when you actually have to come here and get in front of people, it's difficult.
Yep.
So the more you know about the particular thing, I think the better off you're going to do in these environments. So that's kind of why, you know, the outreach programs and strategy, because I kind of want us to talk about how we get there. I have my own ideas on it, and I think, you know, how we set up the officers' duties and stuff like that, I think that's part of it. But there's also other things that we need to kind of, you know, do we need a handbook? Do we need some policies in place? Do we need some kind of methodology that we actually write down that we can pass off to a future generation, so to speak? 2-year turnaround time on members is not a significant amount of time in the developer's world. You know, so if I'm up next year and I don't choose to remain, or I don't get reappointed, there's a considerable amount of work and effort that I put into it that needs to make sure it transitions to somebody else, because that GSS project is still going to be going on. So some of the bigger, like, heavy lifting has already been done, and it's more now just, you know, terms of the agreement that we signed, but still, you know, turnover continuity is something that I think it's important. So we don't have to discuss it tonight if you don't want to, but just that's kind of the goals here. The outreach stuff, making sure that we, you know, we're talking and communicating our message, how we best do that, and then how we organize ourselves so, you know, people don't have a problem approaching us. Say, oh, well, there's a trust. What do they do? Is this the town's property? Who's in charge of this property? Who's going to be submitting the permit? Everybody will know when they go online, or if they ask somebody, oh, the trust is a 7-member body that manages affordable production in town. And here's the properties they own, and here's what they do. And that will end any confusion onto how these things happen. So, nip it in the bud, so to speak. Because I have no patience for, you know, worrying about this other stuff. You know, I just want to do this job. It's the mission that I was assigned to do. I just want to do that and go home. So, I will leave it up to anybody if they got any comments, concerns.
Did you want to start with Ed?
Ed has left.
Oh, yes. Okay. Did you have any thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I think,
I tell you what, with Ed not here, we don't have a quorum. So we're not going to talk about anything more.
alright,
Well, we can discuss without, we're not taking any actions.
We can, but just as long as the general public knows, we're not taking any action. We're just having a general discussion amongst 3 members of the trust.
Yeah, this is in the discussion area. So.
Yes, and that was Ed's comment on before he left, was that if the action items are done, he has to leave. Sorry.
Okay,
All good.
that's fine.
um,
I don't mind keeping the cameras rolling. I just want to make sure that people know that we had a definitive line when we said, okay, we're just talking
Yeah.
Yeah.
talking
that makes
shop.
sense.
yeah, I think something you said kind of made me think that a good way to try to avoid the confusion that happened around this proposed outreach meeting would be for us to kind of be more proactive, maybe have a policy that about like how we want to handle that, so that when somebody external to the trust wants to set up something, we can say, here's how we do this, let's work together.
It makes sense. Matt?
So for me, I think that, you know, had the trust been a little bit more mature in its public engagement process, this kind of would have taken care of itself. So for me, you know, what I would contemplate is maybe designating somebody on the trust to focus on public engagement and to be accountable for a program of public engagements, because I think about, so I've done a fair amount of work with the land trust. They're very good about public engagement. They're constantly on Facebook. They've got, you know, commentary, pictures. They're promoting things. They're working with the library.
Okay.
They're kind of out there. So I think, you know, things like managing the content on the town website or even having our own, having a Facebook presence, doing once or twice yearly forums to just say, hey, here's what the trust is doing, here's what affordable housing is and isn't, here's where we are against the SHI, like just, informational meetings for people to then also hear what their input is, I think would be really useful. And then maybe some discussions on GCTV, like just all of the typical avenues for engaging with the public. But we should have a systemic approach to it, I think. So that's what I'd like to see.
So in order to accomplish some of those things, we talked about this about 8 months ago now, utilizing some of our capital to actually get an administrative assistant, which we could probably put a lot of this the logistics behind. But we should also, on top of that, Jen Goldson, there's a few other consultants out there that are experts in the field and have been doing it for decades.
Sure.
People that put together our housing production plan for us and stuff like that, bringing them in to participate, or at least to, because they have experience in other communities and what works and what doesn't, is bringing them in to kind of foster that relationship too. So it does one thing, in addition to just having an expert on it, it also puts some distance between actual trust members who are also neighbors to a lot of these folks and see them on a regular basis. It puts a little bit of a buffer between. And then, perhaps you can diffuse some of the, some of the hostility that comes up in some of these. Because, I remember back when we were in planning board, when we had a contentious thing, Stop and Shop was tough for a couple weeks after you made a decision or something like that, So we have the capital to do this. We have, I'm not sure if CPA funds can be used for this, but I'll check into it. But that's something that's revolving, so we know we're inside that 40-something thousand a year that's coming in. So I'll look at those type of things if it's an avenue we want to take. Of course, we can't, kind of dictate that tonight, but on the next meeting I'll bring it up. But those were kind of my thoughts on it. And I think it will put a more uniform approach to like you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's also beneficial for actual trust members too, to kind of be part of these, workshops, so to speak. And then we record them, and then maybe we do some, like you said, some work on GCTV. Maybe remotely go out there to 25 Worcester Street, or and kind of look at some of the stuff. I don't know what that means, Jack. Ha! He's got a camera. That's right.
I never knew that was there.
That's awesome.
26 Providence Road.
What about it?
Oh, he's saying the GCTV location is 26 Providence Road. I think he thought you were talking about that.
Oh no! I meant 25 Worcester Street, like going out on site.
Like
where
out
we're
the,
actually
the
doing
trust
the.
property. Yeah.
Let's see. You want me to just kind of move on to the next one so we can get out of here? Upcoming meeting materials. This is kind of just like something I want to put on here. I'm usually pretty good at emailing everybody and saying, what would you like to see on the agenda? I don't have a kind of dialogue back and forth about it. If it can't go on, I'll let you know it can't go on. But by and large, the stuff that I get feedback from is stuff that we'll put on here. I might change how it looks so it's broader, or some stuff to talk about.
Sure.
But I'll make sure I continue to do that. But might not always be chair, so I want to make sure that that's kind of a policy we have moving forward. Because I keep reiterating, the trust has a lot of autonomy and a lot of responsibility. So I want to make sure that everybody has a voice. Let's see. Questions for trust council. I'll have some as we kind of review the minutes to take to her. She'll have a bunch of stuff to kind of go through. If you have any more for right now, just let me know. We'll get into the minutes and we'll send them along. If not, I would like the focal point to interact with council to be the chair for the time being,
Makes sense.
just to manage it. And I'll make sure that I keep the question section on there for stuff that comes up in normal. And if I feel like we're getting backed up on this, or we have some material that we should have help with right there, I'll ask you to attend.
Now,
So the second
this
Thursday
council
works for her.
Distinct from town council?
It is.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I thought it would be
Makes sense.
the goal, and it's kind of what we talked about. And this doesn't, it's not a reflection on staff. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that. In the past, we've had assignments that have been dedicated to us, and then they've changed hands. And it's really hurt the continuity of the program, and it's really made us reliant on outside people for stuff that we should know how to do. So I kind of want to walk that back, cut the corridor a little bit. Chris is a wealth of knowledge on affordable programs, and he's an integral part of the planning because he's the town planner. So of course he's going to be involved, but like administrative stuff like setting up Zoom meetings, he needs to be doing the more important stuff. We need to make sure we're doing that on our own.
Sure.
And Chris just gets an invite and hopefully can attend or answer questions. It just, there needs to be a balancing act. We need to make sure we're good partners with the town, but we're not also placing undue demands, and building our own thing.
Sure.
So,
Look, Bruce, if there's any administrative stuff like that, that you need, I mean, just let me know what you need. I can certainly, I've got some time to dedicate to this, so.
and I think as we work around clerk and treasurer and kind of pass, the baton, if we do it, every couple months, I thought 4, maybe 3, whichever. You just hand off, you get together and, talk about, Dan will tell the next person, this is who I talked to, and make the introduction and pass it around. Everybody knows, they get them around the municipal center, meeting people and seeing all the people. And I think that will probably foster a lot of, dialogue, which is helpful too. Because, new ideas and coming up with, stuff that's out of the sandbox, which everybody's accustomed to. Like stuff that has a real impact on, senior assisted living, stuff that can fall under our purview that we can help with, other assisted living type of programs. Halfway house is a bad way to term it, but I don't have another term for it. But those type of scenarios are stuff that we can do, and we can, match them up with property which they can build that on, and we can help it. And if we have all the tools in place, 40B processes. I'm not going to say it's a mess, but it's pretty cumbersome stuff. And if you don't know your way through it, you may be leaving a lot on the table as far as a development is concerned and what you can be doing to help people, because you just don't know the program. So we should be gearing ourselves for that too as an extension of our public outreach type of campaign.
Makes sense.
Because it's just as good information for developers, and for people who, like the social workers that were here, this might be a platform where they say, well, let's do some of that type of work on 25 Worcester Street. Let's do some assisted living. Let's do some work like that, which falls under our purview. It doesn't really have an impact on our SHI, but that doesn't matter to us, and we're just doing programs that benefit the public at large. Beneficial. All right, so I'm going to let everybody go home unless everybody has anything else. Next meeting will be second Thursday of September. And then I guess Matt and I will work together to try to coordinate some Hudson Ave stuff with the town, see if it's workable over the next couple weeks.
Sounds good.
All right, well, we are adjourned.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I don't know if we can even vote, but sure,
No,
second.
for this you can, yes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned so we can turn off the camera.